Very excited to have distinguished speakers today with us with a diverse background, with well-established executives and other entrepreneurs that have a very exciting and a bumpy journey, as we were discussing yesterday. As we all know, the digital transformation continue to shape our world of today, as this adage is cooperated by the evolving trends of our increasingly data-driven information age. We hear a lot data-driven decisions or data-based policies. And this session will be touching on the breadth of issues covering topics such as data privacy, transparency, blockchain applications, cybersecurity, and how all of these are on top of each other and incorporated into policies that turn into opportunities, where data plays an important role in actualizing visions for a sustainable future, as sustainability and data go hand by hand in our day-to-day implementations to the biggest visions and strategies on a regional scale. And yet, that being said, we're navigating through a scarcity of data in the regional context, and our panelists will provide us with a hands-on insights and into challenges, opportunities to make data-backed change and data-driven decisions that we prolonged waited for. And we have a distinguished speakers that have a hands-on experience rather than dictating opportunities and dictating policy to us. So again, I'll be hosting the session for those who just joined us. I'll be moderating this. Mahmoud Bassam from Jordan. I'm a sustainable energy advisor at Jordan Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund. And I also work under the UNFCCC Youth Constituency in the policy working group, where we provide policy recommendations and approaches using data analysis to the Secretary General of the UNFCCC and the UN Assembly. First, I would like to thank our speakers for their time, and we will be starting with Mr. Jamil Asfour. Thank you again for joining us and your time. Mr. Jamil is an accomplished executive with more than 20 years of experience working for Fortune 500 companies across the globe, including Apple, IBM, HPE, Ernst & Young, and Symantec. As an advisor and a management consultant, his main areas of focus are digital transformation, technology, partnerships, and investments. He's also a widely known contributor to the Global Innovation Index and the Global Connectivity Index. And that's the short version of his bio, not the long one. And Mr. Jamil, after working in the projects in the field of technology in the international context with big tech pioneers like Apple and consulting in EY, where do you see that the focus should be in the current time to support digital transformation in the region? And especially noting what we hear is data poverty or data scarcity. Please, the floor is yours. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. It's very exciting. I'm sorry, my mic went off, but I assume the question was about, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. After working in projects in the field of technology and in the international context in big tech companies like Apple and consulting with EY, where do you see that the focus should be in the meantime to support digital transformation in the region, especially with the known term data scarcity or data poverty in the region?
Sure. Thank you. Well, it's a no surprise that today the challenges that we have are still around ubiquitous connectivity, security and trustability, interoperability, lack of role models, and also kind of, adaptability and the return on investments, I would say. And allow me to elaborate a bit more. the West today, somewhere like the United States, still lack the connectivity in the rural areas. In the Middle East, we still have challenges in connectivity. Now, as 5G is being rolled out and as fiber optics is being rolled out, the interoperability is improving and the ubiquitous connectivity is improving, but still, today, there are more than 400 standards of, for example, IoT. So each entity or each country slash industry are working. I would say we don't have smart cities. We have kind of smart islands. There's a healthcare industry, there's a manufacturing industry, and they all have their own standards. We need to start connecting them together. As an executive, one of the biggest questions, or as a consultant or advisor to executives, they always ask, well, I need to spend X. When would I see the return on investment? Should I really make the decision as the C-level executive or have somebody after me make that decision? It will maybe prolong my position. So there are these challenges that we have. In addition to this, truthfully, is, today with digital transformation, there's a big question around not only what would this do to the company, but to the people. There's a strong resistance around, how to roll out digital transformation. And I think a big part of it is the lack of education, awareness, and communication. All these together will put us at the heart of data. We heard this term before. Data is the new oil. But whether it's a small company or a large company, who owns the data? Is it you as an individual? When you sign, these multiple pages say, I agree. Did you really read every single term of it? And where is it registered? In what laws? And how can you go after the company when you post your picture online? At the end of the day, there needs to be a serious investment in infrastructure. In the Middle East, these are 20 plus countries. Some countries are more advanced than others. We have to keep that into consideration. And also, we have to continue to be aware, develop our skills, and develop, I would say, an interoperable standards that can work together. So we can have a better smart city and a better data and privacy. I think it should come from the companies. Private companies should do good. And as a governance / governments should enforce some kind of a data privacy and security. Hence, in Europe, there's a very small version, I would say, GDPR, and we didn't even scratch the surface yet.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Jamil, for your swift and condensed reply. I really appreciate you sticking with the time as well. We will have next in the lineup Mr. Gavin McCormick. Sorry if I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's a co-founder and executive director of What Time, tech nonprofit that advances emissions reduction and research in the field of electricity. What Time is best known for inventing automated emissions reduction (AER) technology software, which enables fleets of electric vehicles, smart thermostats, and other smart devices to time their electricity use to reduce the use of the most polluting power plants. As an electrical engineer, that plays on a very, very good harmony and very interesting, as I'm a passionate and an advocate for climate change, yet with a background of electrical engineering, that I'm one of your biggest fans as well. And you can see we have a lineup of your fans today in the event. So Mr. Gavin, working in developing new products that connect edge technology and environment is a very complicated journey anywhere in the world. And you can see big companies that are trying to do that globally, and yet they suffer a lot. And would you walk us through the main two challenges faced in your journey, and how did you face them as a person or a company, and how did you overcome them in terms, as I mentioned, in terms of having this very difficult and complicated task that had been also in an increasing shed of light of media and public interest?
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, and I'm really happy to be here. In terms of our challenges, it might be helpful if I say for a second a little bit more what our technology does, and then I'll describe the challenges. So we have this technology we call automated emissions reduction, and it works on the basis that all of these IoT devices that use electricity, so that's most IoT devices, but from an environmental perspective, the really important ones are electric vehicles or smart thermostats. If you think about from an electrical engineering perspective, how does that affect the environment? It's a little known fact that often when you plug in one of these devices, it's even though we have many power plants in a region, it'll be a single power plant that will produce a little bit more electricity because of your electricity consumption. And so we founded WattTime as a group of students with the idea, what if you could choose which power plant was going to provide your electricity consumption? What if maybe there is a coal plant and an oil plant and a windmill, and maybe you could deliberately use electricity only from the windmill, and it would be a very interesting way to reduce pollution that we like because we think it can be done on a purely software level. So we analyze in a given power grid, if you plug something in at one time, which power plant is going to be the one that will respond to your actions. And there are all kinds of interesting applications you can do with this. You can charge electric vehicles on solar power by charging them at the right time of day. You can even do very surprising things like you can build a new solar panel or wind farm in the area we know it will do the most good. So one of my favorite statistics is if you build a new solar panel in, say, Jordan, it has roughly 20 times the environmental benefit of the exact same solar panel in Sweden. And so I think it's surprising how much data can help for emissions. And so maybe unsurprisingly, one of our biggest issues is if we are thinking about on a global basis, how do you have more benefit from emissions? You need to have data all over the world. And so there's a really limited number of countries where the very detailed information on what every power plant is doing is available. So it's basically the United States and Taiwan in the entire world that 5 years ago were providing so much open data to the public that you could do all these complex calculations of, okay, which power plant is going to respond. And so one of our biggest challenges has been, how can we move from a world where this technology that's very effective in reducing emissions is only available in a couple of places to how can we make this really available worldwide? And so we have started working with a number of organizations on trying to solve that problem, trying to really open up data globally. So I'd say that's been one of our biggest challenges is moving to truly global open data access. And I think our other biggest challenge that was a little surprising to me, we knew that there was going to be pushback to this technology, but we expected that the companies that went after us would be the ones who are doing a lot of polluting. We expected it would be the coal companies saying, hey, you're trying to reduce pollution in coal plants. We don't like this. To our considerable surprise, this is not where the pushback came from. We have instead gotten a lot more pushback from companies that have been in the business of making money by claiming that they were reducing emissions, and maybe there wasn't actually a whole lot of science behind some of these claims. So it has been very interesting to be trying to advance technology in the context of there's a lot of money on the table for which data are true, and there is a lot of vested interest in making sure that certain answers are believed by everybody. And so we have had to work with a lot of universities and a lot of different groups to say, how can we make sure in this context where some companies make more money if the emissions data have a certain answer, how can we make sure the truth rises to the top? And so in both ways, those are essentially data problems. One is how can we have any answer for everywhere in the world? And the second is how can we make sure if there's a certain company that maybe was exaggerating how much their power plants were making money or was exaggerating how much buying their product was going to make any difference because they're getting paid in carbon offsets or something like that. How can we have a system where the biggest funded company doesn't get to choose the answer, and instead what answer is true rises to the top, and we can see that everywhere. So those are the big two issues we've been struggling with over the last few years, and I like to think we're making progress, but it is not easy.
Inshallah, a lot of progress will be in the future projects for you. And yeah, I really echo that. I really love that statement. Not the most funded will own the truth. And I think that implies in a lot of climate action projects, unfortunately. Um, Sari, I loved our discussion the other day, and Sari is the founder and CEO of Zena AI, the world's first Arabic AI-powered intelligence voice and chat assistant, with over 10 years of entrepreneurial experience in technology and innovation. Sari currently leads Zena's product development and regional business expansion. During his diverse career, Sari received several awards, including the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, Abdul Hamid Shraman Innovation Award, which is our uh, uh, local EY Innovation Award, as well as Seed Stars Most Promising Startup in Jordan. Sari, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I would say a pure Jordanian entrepreneur with a localized experience and a hands-on experience. Sari, you had a diverse experience in the entrepreneurial sector in Jordan with a fair share of challenges in your endeavors. In Zena, your work to develop Arabic voice assistant is quite advanced, and it create a product that is competitive with big players in the game. When we talk about Siri, Google Assistant, and yet with a relatively small team and resources, what's the recipe to success in the context? And do you see that the lack of skills, as it's a hot topic right now about having skill sets in AI and voice recognition by engineers, software developers? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, and it's a pleasure to join this panel. First of all, definitely, in my opinion, I believe the recipe for success. There's no such thing as success until you make an exit in a startup, right? Until you liquidate what you have built. But let's assume it's a success. I believe the recipe for success was to build a differentiated product. This is number one, because I see that in the recent years we have seen a lot of startups coming out from our region. However, we are having a lot of similar ideas, repetitive ideas, etc. So I believe the first factor for success in our region is to have a real differentiated product, a localized product that solves a real problem in our region and in our market. And I believe the second factor would be having the right partners and the right investors on your side. To build such a product with a very advanced technology, it requires a lot of resources, data, talent, and funding as well. So you need strong believers on your side, and they know what they are signing up for, and they know the risk associated with building such a startup and such a product. So in my opinion, these are the main two factors for success. Definitely, it's very difficult with very limited resources and the scarcity of I wouldn't say talents as we were discussing yesterday, but I would say lack of skills. It's very difficult to compete with the big players in this market, such as Apple, Google, Microsoft, IBM, etc. However, we chose to find a gap, something that those big players are not covering, and to focus on that gap, which is the Arabic dialects. Today, Google Assistant, Siri, or the other similar products in the market, they are only focusing on the Arabic standard language, which is we only use it in the if you hear the news, or if you want to hear the weather forecast. But there's over 22 countries in our region. Each country has its own dialects. Even in Jordan, as a small country with around 10 million population, you will find a lot of dialects, Arabic dialects in our region. So we decided to focus on the Arabic dialects, a product built in MENA for MENA consumers. And I believe this would be the differentiator in this space, and this will what will give us the edge in the market.
Thank you, Sari. I was taking a screenshot for a memory, so sorry. And thank you for your answer. And I wanted maybe to highlight your idea, Sari, as well on the skill set, as we were discussing, between scarcity of skills or scarcity of talents. And do we have enough capacity or not? What do you think in 2 minutes, please?
Yeah, of course, we need first to distinguish between talents and skills, because I believe we have a lot of talents in our region. However, those talents, they might not have the skills, so we need to equip them with the skills. And I believe our universities and our educational systems in our region is still lacking in that area, and they are not providing the needed skills for those talents. When we started building the product, the first challenge we faced was finding the right team to build such a product.
Mhm.
So, and again, because of the lack of resources, so we can't bring experts from other areas in the world to build the product for us. So we made a bet on young, talented engineers from the Jordanian universities, and we equip them with the infrastructure, the knowledge, and the resources so they can learn and develop the product. And I believe it was a winning bet because we managed to build the product, and we managed to raise $1 million US of funding. So
Alhamdulillah.
yeah, alhamdulillah. So I believe this is what we need in our region. We need to believe in our talents and to equip them with the skills and the resources that they need, especially data. Especially when we are talking about AI, we need to provide them with the data and the resources, the infrastructure, the computational power to develop advanced algorithms and advanced applications in voice recognition or any other sectors of AI.
Can't agree more. And I think that also supports the idea of creating a good environment to support others. And I think it's environment, not individuals. And I can't agree more. Environment, environment, environment. And then it can create the dream of policy strategies, which is jobs, 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 and economic growth. And I think environment that is hospitable and supportive of youth can transform a lot of the potential we have. Mr. Jamil, back to you, and identifying the problem is half of the solution. That's what we like to say in Jordan. And in the Arab region in general, we have seen multiple approaches in the field of digital transformation, swinging between dramatic success and dramatic failures, with a bit of with a bit of, I say, excitement and surprises sometimes of the huge successes as well. And what are the main lessons learned and gaps in developing the proper set of instruments to enable the digital transformation in general? And we talk about, you have mentioned this before, data security, privacy, transparency, and so on and so forth.
You know, I'd like to start with a story. I'm not much of a storyteller, but I'll try. I used to love watching movies when I was a kid. So I used to go rent them from Blockbusters. Back then there was Betamax. That was the best technology out there. It no longer exists.
As
And
maybe you would say, sorry, there were no Netflix at that time.
absolutely not. I guess that
No
tells my
YouTube.
age. That tells my age. That tells my age. You know, I'm from a different generation, I guess. So it was Betamax. Then we went into VHS, CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, etc. One of the major things of Blockbusters is they no longer exist. They failed to digitally transform into streaming. Now, of course, I don't have the inside scope of Blockbuster in general, but I can tell you in any organization, I'm pretty sure somebody said, no, I worry about my stores. I want to have the power. How many actually employees I need to hire? The digital content people said that's too much work. We want the control. We want funding. Probably there was a process issue in the company. And I'm not dissecting Blockbuster. I'm saying a general company here. Just to put that disclaimer there. And the CEO said, that's an IT issue. My job is to be visionary. When today we go to clients and the conversation starts with, we need to have a digital transformation strategy with the IT department, it is important enough, but it is one of many components, and we have started at the wrong place. Digital transformation is a way of life. We don't talk about how we obtain electricity today. It's given. We don't talk about food and water. It's scarce, but it's given. Digital transformation is a way of life. So today it needs to happen on the board level. And we need to, I like this, Michael Porter's example. We have to differentiate between operational efficiency and a digital transformation. Having a conversation is whether you need to have your data center on premise or on the cloud. That's an operational efficiency problem or issue. Digital transformation needs to happen at the board level by saying, where do you want the company to go? What is the purpose of the company? What is the most important of the company? If it starts well with profits, with people, and not with your customers, whether they're your employees, your colleague is a customer. And your customer is a customer. If you don't start with that first, you have failed the ultimate to ultimately transform. Then you go into the processes, the IT systems, and yada, yada. So cost, that's a gap. Most people will say, yes, I will make that big announcement. You have that CEO blessing, but then you'll have middle management with a change of culture that is not there yet. So communication, you need to have comms externally. You need to have comms internally. You cannot change people's behavior. Also KPIs. If you want someone to fail, set up unrealistic KPIs. What are your matrix of measurements? That is very critical for any company. How would you measure a digital transformation success or failure? I have to go back and say to clients, let's reset and reboot. What do you really want to accomplish? How much money? Then I'll go into how much money was spent. Where are we in the digital transformation? Why are we in the digital transformation business in the first place? Where are we going? So cost is important. You need to have leadership. You need to have ownership, company culture, external and internal. Define the success measurements and matrix, but also give it time. This philosophy of fail fast is not always true. Sometimes it takes time for things to develop. Ultimately, these are the gaps in any transformation in general. And in digital transformation, I would add to that, that's the caveat. I hope I've answered the question.
It's amazing, and I really liked your idea of reset and reboot. I think that's what one of the most famous said words and mostly repeated. It's يرجع شغله, and hopefully it will work. And which is for those who don't speak Arabic, we say switch it off and switch it on, and hopefully it will be working properly. And that's a really good and insightful approach. And I really liked your highlighting of very big and realistic KPIs setting and then not being able to meet them, and as a key a key phenomenon, not to repeat and to learn lessons from it. Thank you, Mr. Jamil. I think that highlights a lot of the challenges we have faced in the region. Back to you, Gavin. Climate Trace Coalition, launched in 2020, counts for 12 nonprofits, tech companies, and universities as members, as the then 50 additional organizations from around the globe have also contributed by providing access to datasets and additional AI models, reviewing the climate trace methodology and validating findings to track greenhouse gas emissions. These efforts, to be honest, are extraordinary, and like hearing to put 12 non-profits together is nearly impossible. And seeing a more global impact into data to be accessible for researchers, SMEs, and SMEs globally, especially in the global south. And having said that, and I would also highlight that you have mentioned this before about open data, and that being said, and since Time What is a non-profit, do you see that the access for climate action related data can be open in the near future in a way that is supportive for global south, especially small medium enterprises, and I would say maybe small institutional levels, academic researchers, and what is needed for that to happen? Policy tools, incentives, I don't know, support within like a governmental body. What's your take on that, Gavin?
So I think that there are many forms of data, and I only have expertise in emissions data, so I can only answer on that part. But I think the short version is I have been really surprised in the last 2 years by how quickly we are moving towards open data on a truly global scale. Just for context, I was born in South Africa, and so when I spent a lot of time in the United States looking at electricity emissions data, it was always in my mind, like, why can't I get this data for my own country? Why is it the case that in some places this is available and not others? And so when we tried as Watt Time to expand outside and to get this data available in every country, we from the very beginning just were really aware of how the normal way that you try to solve the lack of data everywhere is you go to the usual suspects who are already providing data in really rich areas, and you try to get them to expand their methods. We thought that's never going to work. It's not going to happen that in South Africa, pretty soon we will have Google coming in with all its sensors and selling at $30,000 per power plant, and we're going to do that everywhere in the world. It's not going to work. So we tried to think, what is a solution from day one that can be truly globally available? And again, I only know emissions data. But what we basically hit upon is that people are saying that data is like the new oil, but there's actually a really big difference. If I use a gallon of oil, you can't use it anymore. Whereas with data, I can use it and you can also use it, and that's okay. And we hit upon this idea, what if instead of trying to solve this the traditional way where we're just, everybody has to pay for everything? What if we had a system where everybody who has data has some reason to share it with the common pot, and everyone gets to see their data, but for some reason it makes sense for them to make that contribution? And what if we could build a system like Wikipedia where people have a reason to contribute and it can all be shared globally? And I think what we hit upon is that in many, many cases where a company has data about the environment, they're making their profit off of something else. So an interesting example for me was there was a cement company in India, Dalmia Cement. They had particularly clean cement and they wanted everybody to know. So they were very happy, because they make all their money on cement, to donate all of their data to this project. And then because AI algorithms, the more data you feed them, the smarter they get. Just the fact that this one company had decided to donate its data meant that our algorithms were smarter at measuring every cement plant in the world. And we've hit upon this idea that just for emissions data, it doesn't work for everything. If there really are enough companies and enough governments all around the world, particularly with some help from some universities and so on, that want to see the whole world's emissions data be open and transparent and accurate for everyone, that we really do think it is working to have this kind of big club. There's no CEO of Climate Trace, nobody's in charge, there's no business model, but there are many, many, many organizations who have a reason to put data in the pot that they want to be seen by everyone. And the thing about data is the more you combine in one data set, the more it becomes high quality. And so I think we are in a world where within 6 months, we are going to see in every country in the world pretty high quality emissions data starting to be available to the public. And within 3 years, we're going to start seeing that very high quality everywhere in the world. And this is, I think, very different than what's come before. And the only reason it's working is this sharing. It's the fact there's so many organizations that they have figured out a business model where sharing their data about climate change doesn't cost them anything, makes their prestige a little better. And that model that looks more like Wikipedia, I think it will work for emissions. And I don't know if it'll work for everything, but I think we're going to be a little surprised by how quickly emissions data is something that in every country, we can actually see it for every sector.
I hope we can replicate that outside also the emissions circle and into other things that can support maybe directing investments, as you mentioned in the first question, in terms of adaptation funds and climate mitigation, in terms of trying to allocate and define where is it more feasible and I think low cost, high impact measures that it can support to support economic prosperity for others, create jobs and so on and so forth, and the as mentioned the usual suspects. Sari, I have a very, very interesting question, and مش حملنا منه عليك. We're not invading you. You have a seed round with $1 million US for Zena, and you have stated in a press release that you are intending to expand over the region, and in order for Arabic customer-based products to success, it's the only way to make it feasible. And I think that's the case for most Arabic startups. And I would like to see your take on what's the limitation of scalability of data-oriented startups. Does the legislative framework help, or is it helpful in some areas and other areas not? And do pro-entrepreneurship media announcements really reflect support on the ground, or do they, as Mr. Jamil said earlier, middle management sometimes will stop you to some extent and create some kind of soft resistance? Please, the floor is yours.
Well, I believe, Ahmed, when we say the scalability of the startup, we're talking about two parts here. There's the business scalability, and there's the product scalability. And when we are talking about business scalability, we always say that MENA is a huge market with a huge potential, but we have 22 countries in MENA with 22 different legislative frameworks. So we are not talking about one market here. It could take you up to 2 weeks to set up a company in one country and 6 months in a neighboring country. So I think we still need a lot to do in that regards. But I will try to focus more on product scalability, since we are talking about data and data scarcity. And in order to scale any data-oriented product, I believe the limitation today is with mindsets. It's not related to a legal framework or something like that, because today when we are approaching a new client, a bank or a telco or a mega logistics company, the main issue we face is we want the solution on-prem. However, for us to make sense and to have a feasible product, we need to have it on our own cloud and to distribute the product for multiple users, so we can collect data from multiple endpoints and we can improve our product. But still, there's a lot of resistance in the private sector, and it's different, and it differs from a sector to another sector, Ahmed. You will find some sectors more eager to adopt such solutions, but other sectors, they still want to have control on everything. They want the solution on-prem. They don't believe in the subscription model, for example. They want to have a perpetual license, but for us that doesn't make any sense. So this is one of the challenges that I believe it will limit the scalability of such products. Things are changing, things are improving, but I believe we still need a lot of time. One other factor that Mr. Jamil already mentioned is patience and return on investment. A lot of companies, they expect to have a return on their investment after they implement the solution in 2 months, 3 months, a year. But we are talking about AI algorithms. You need to be patient. You are not transforming your customer experience because of the customers you have today. You are transforming for the customers of the future. My consumer behavior will be different than my kids' consumer behavior. And my father's consumer behavior is different than my consumer behavior. So you are not building, what I always say, that we are not building for now, we are building for the future, and the future starts now. So if you don't start implementing such solution, and if you don't consider implementing and transforming the way you do business, then in 2 or 3 years, your business will be left behind. Now, regarding your second question, it was about media, right?
It was entrepreneurship media announcements.
Yeah,
Do
it's
they reflect? Excuse me.
yeah. I think it gives you a push to some extent, Ahmed. But now there's entrepreneurship, startup media outlets all over the place, and I don't think it gives you that advantage. If you don't have a product market fit, if you don't have the traction, if you don't have a clear competitive advantage and a differentiator, then even if you have media coverage day in and out, it will not help you out.
Uh, I can second you on each word on that. And I think it's really interesting when you see startups trying to build solutions to be used on the medium and long term. And I think it's very interesting to see that visionary look, but yet with a realistic business model and being able to relate it to reality rather than just ambitious plans that has no scientific basis or proof of model. Mr. Jamil, back to you. And mentioning the role of startups in the region and how they can support the region economically in creating jobs and creating economic prosperity. Um, how do you see in a post-COVID era, as CNN and BBC like to say, have a successful model where the landscape has evolved rapidly, and maybe Zoom as an example, as we were discussing earlier, and how can the MENA/Arabic startups do a replica of such opportunities and hunt down opportunities to go where the big giants cannot go.
Sure, thank you. First, I'd like to, I guess, go back to the previous point. I just want to make sure that I'm not insinuating that every digital transformation is a static strategy, and that has to just be static, and then it's going to take a long time. What we need to do is the digital transformation needs to be dynamic and needs to pivot as the company's needs. So you have to have more than one pillars and more than one measure of success. Some of them will be slower than others, but I do also recognize that the C-levels and the P&L owners will have to have quick wins. So it has to be a give or take. Now, definitely and sadly, the COVID era did accelerate digital transformation. Digital transformation was evolving, but within the COVID era, it became a revolution instead of an evolution. People were forced to work remotely, were forced to use different types of platforms to connect and work. And therefore, there was more demand. There was more understanding that you can actually work remotely. I don't have to see you from 8 to 5 or 8 to 8 or whatever the time is to be at work. we're actually having an issue today with the Great Resignation. Many people, and a famous, I would say, scientist. I don't want to mention the name of a big corporation. Just decided to resign due to the new policies that they have to actually go back to work from the office again, and they're too comfortable working from home. That being said, digital transformation did transform and accelerate within COVID era. We see applications such as Zoom, WebEx, etc., being accepted. It's okay for you to work remotely. It's okay actually for your kid to pop up in a meeting, or your dog, or etc. That's normal. Now, what is very dear to my heart is the startup ecosystem, because this takes tenacity and courage and hard work. People usually see the unicorns and decacorns and etc., but they don't know what these people have sweat and what they let go of their personal lives to succeed. My advice is, if you're in it for the fame, don't enter this game. If you want to succeed because of your passion. Find the problem, solve it. People invest in people. People hire people. People gets fascinated by people. Problem is a small part of what we invest in. Yes, we want to identify the problem. We want the solution. We want the product. We want and return on investment. That's what we look for. My advice for angel investors, and I'm one of the investors, remember, it's a full contact sport. You don't give them money and you set them free. You actually roll up your sleeves and you have very cognitive debates across the table, and you steer the way, but never steal the passion of the founders. Guide them, support them, and give them the knowledge that you have. But remember, they have knowledge that you may lack. So continue with them. The Middle East has shed lots of light on startups lately, and lately I'd say in the past 10 years maybe. I see a lot of passion, and that honestly just engages me and excites me, and I love that. We have lots of talent, 380 million plus. Most of them are youth. We have huge support from a market perspective and from funding perspective in Saudi Arabia, which is the biggest market. The second biggest is the United Arab Emirates. We have a huge talent pool in Egypt, in Jordan, some talent also in Lebanon, in North Africa as well. It's amazing. So if we are to take the talent, look at the market, find solutions, it's still, I would say, a brown field. There's a lot that we need to accomplish, and it's exciting. That's why you see a lot of expats coming to the Middle East today, because most of Europe has been developed already, and the funding's actually dried up. The US, it depends where you go. Everybody wants to go to the Silicon Valley, but they don't understand, honestly, the challenges of the Silicon Valley. I love it. I used to live there. And it's a great place to be. But the Middle East is absolutely, absolutely my Disney World today for startups. There's a lot for you to solve. And I would say focus on Saudi Arabia, focus on the UAE, where they have the funding, the markets. I'm not saying neglect other places. I'm just saying focus on these places. And really, these two countries have been giving amazing support. Of course, Jordan, with the resources that they have, has done wonders, and so did other countries.
Very inspiring, and I'll be quoting you on Twitter this week, so be aware of spamming waves. I really liked your take on full contact sport, and I think it's really important to understand that hard work works, but you have to put on the work. I think we have good amount of time. Thank you all speakers for being so committed to your time period. And I think we have a question from Dana Debussy, our co-chair. What do you do about organizations? I think this is for you, Gavin. What do you do about organizations that are afraid to share data? There are implications in the oil and gas sector about sharing scope 3 emissions. I've heard from many people in the industry that if they share where their scope 3 is, they're giving away confidential information about their sales, etc. How much of this accurate versus just a hesitancy to take part in something new?
Oh, thank you for the very interesting question. I think so for anyone who doesn't spend their whole life thinking about emissions data, scope 3 emissions is the emissions of my customers most often, or other emissions in the supply chain. So we spend a lot of time thinking about how can we get as many organizations as possible as comfortable donating data as possible. But we have an unusual hammer that many groups don't have, which is that if you train an AI model with all the people who did donate, it changes the situation for a company that doesn't want to donate, because you can say, we are going to provide our best estimate whether or not you donate data. So we would like you to make sure you think this is accurate and everything. But if you don't think so, we are going to post our best guess online anyway. And so that changes the conversation with a lot of oil companies. And we found that a lot of them are very interested in donating data, so at least they know it's right. And sometimes we can't see their supply chain from space. So we do focus much more on scope 1 emissions. So I think it's a balance of trying to come to the table with a reason they should participate, and also always trying to think of a way that we're not asking them to donate anything about supply chains that is proprietary information.
I love your approach. It's take it or leave it. Either way, publishing it. So we're a bit ahead of time, and we didn't receive many questions. And I would like to ask the speakers, since you have been very, very amazing in keeping your time duration, if you'd like to comment on other people's questions or other ideas. I would love to get your take on what topics that weren't aimed at you. Please feel free to share your opinion with 1 or 2 minutes, like a perspective overview, whatever you want to call it.
I think we also have one more question from Salman.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry, Salman. Apart from top-down regulatory shifts to progress data sharing, what can individuals do in their capacity to evolve the culture of data transparency? I think that's also something maybe Gavin, Jamil, Sari, whoever wants to take that question. Would you like me to repeat? Okay. It's available on the chat as well. Apart from top-down regulatory shifts to progress data sharing, what can individuals do in their capacity to evolve the culture of data transparency?
I believe there's a lot that you can do as an individual. You own your own data, and you own your behavior. So once you refuse to post certain things in a certain behavior, companies will listen. If you will demand, if you will ask, first ask, then demand. It is your right. After all, you know what? Maybe I don't want my picture to be online. There are ways to put it, but you know what? If you are to use these free applications and paid ones, make sure that data is going to be monetized in a way or another. It is just a natural behavior. I mean, of course, I'm not saying leave your laptop, your phone behind and go back to, to the Stone Age. But I am saying there needs to be an awareness of how you use your data and how you use social media and the internet in general. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. Gavin, Sari, would you like to comment on that? Or if you have any additional remarks or points that you wanted to raise within other questions as well, please feel free to share your opinions.
I was just thinking that there are a number of companies that, because we're a nonprofit, we often think about what are the goals besides just profit. And so we've been impressed how often there are companies that are less famous than Google, Facebook, and so on, who have a deal that they will use your data, but you will get a little bit of say in how. So I have never used it, but I'm very interested by this idea. Diaspora was an alternative to Facebook, where the idea is the user had more control over what happens with their data. And we are seeing a number of new organizations start to say, we're going to try to compete with the bigger companies. But it's not just privacy, it's that you have a little more control over your data. And I hope that all of us individuals will reward the companies that we think are doing smart things with our data. And then we all have more say.
I also like to think that we're still in a very early age of developing our data governance when compared to the financial systems, for example, where we lived for centuries without any central banks or any kind of approaches that happens in the past. But nowadays, you cannot imagine things happening that are related to without central banks. And for example, one of the funny things that I've heard recently, they were thinking about making a Paris Agreement look-alike for data and the COP on a yearly basis for data as well. And I think that synergy also gives us an insight on how data is. I know that the ITUC is playing an important role in doing that. The International Telecommunication Union, which is the oldest association that targets this kind of issues, and it's under the umbrella of the UN, but yet it's very, very lagging behind when it's compared to other topics like financial services, for example, where there's a lot of developed policies that governs rules and organize relationships in that sector. So I think that concludes our nights, unless our speakers want to highlight anything. Is there anything that you guys want to say, reminisce?
I wanted to add to Mr. Jamil's point, where I believe if people are aware what you are doing with their data, and if they are being incentivized enough, I think people wouldn't mind sharing data if they feel comfortable. And we have an example for that. We needed to improve the Jordanian dialect for our product, but we didn't have enough data, so we created a platform where people share with us voice notes, call recordings, and etc. in return of incentive, a financial incentive. And you'd be surprised how many people participated in that platform and how many people decided to give us their voice notes and call recordings.
راحت علي. I wish I knew that. I would have made some real money out of that. But I wasn't aware of that. I speak very good Jordanian.
The door is still open, so you can participate.
Good point. You have earned a new customer, a new business partner, actually. So without further ado, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. ختامها مسك. That's what we say in Arabic.